welcome to our home in Chicago.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are here for another day before heading back down to Nashville, and then you have a quick trip down to Florida. So today we are going to jump in for just a few minutes, talk about the music publishing business. It is something that we got involved with in August of 2019, which is pretty wild. So we are coming up on this will be a 6-year anniversary of
That's crazy,
yeah,
actually.
of Edgehill Music Publishing this August, September.
August, yeah.
So
Wow.
we started a company called Edgehill Music Publishing in August, September of 2019. Before we made our mostly full-time move to Nashville, we started a year prior, before COVID hit. We started Edgehill Music Publishing. So we came up with the name. The first house that we had bought in Nashville was in what neighborhood?
Edgehill.
Edgehill. So
We were surprised that name wasn't taken.
yeah, for sure. Edgehill, the Edgehill neighborhood in Nashville is right off of Music Row, the historic Music Row. So there's a really, really cool little area in Nashville called Music Row, and it's great history for the music business. A lot primarily country music, back in the day, but just music in general. And so we just one day came up with Edgehill Music Publishing. And it wasn't taken. And you and myself and a very young Spencer Rabin, who was 18 at the time,
Yes.
Which is pretty crazy, still in high school, kind of incubated this and started it up and into what it is today. We had no idea what music publishing was at the time, at all. And you had found a young woman songwriter, artist on Instagram that you were following. And you've always been, we both love music, but you have always had a way better ear for music in terms of you just had a way different connection to music than I do. I love music, but you love it in a different way than I do, which is really cool. So you were following this woman on Instagram.
I was following a few of them, and I
few of
sent them
them,
over
actually,
to
yes.
Spencer because I was we didn't know what publishing was, and I'd sent him an Instagram post, and I say, "What do you think of this person? Is this somebody that we would want?" I know what I like, but I didn't know until now what we're really looking for. But yeah, it was truly, that's how simple it was in our minds.
It was crazy weird that we got into that. I should say. So we it's been quite a journey. We
That's what publishing is part of, though. Publishing is a journey.
Without question. But we jumped into this industry when I was still full-time in real estate and cannabis, and then we just had this wacky idea to do this together. So that was our first adventure together, business-wise.
It was. Spencer, we went to Spencer and said we want to do something in the music industry. It intrigued us so much. We didn't know what that was because none of us truly are musically inclined. We're not talented like that.
We're not.
No, me and you and the girls. We like concerts together, but we just don't do anything. Sydney plays she plays the piano, and Sophie briefly played the guitar. But we just said, what does it look like? Where is our place in the music industry? And Spencer said, knowing the people that you guys are, you're very much into the journey of people and supporting people and the behind the scenes. And he said, so I believe that music publishing is where you guys belong. So, you want to explain what that means?
We just
and why it was actually a very sweet thing for him to say because that is how we are. But we can now explain why what publishing is and why we are the people behind the scenes.
We jumped into it, and we really had truly no clue what it was all about. But music publishing is working with songwriters, artists, producers of music. A lot of it the great majority of it, if not all of it, is all about the song and making sure that the song is great. And being a publisher is, it's a whole business, and it's a wacky, crazy business for the publishing company, who's the publisher, as well as for the artists, the songwriters, the producers, etc., that are the real artists behind the music. So
they're the storytellers.
Yeah, the storytellers behind songs and the music and the records that are out there. And so, we got involved in it in 2019. We had signed our first writer and artist, and we definitely have learned a lot. I would say the first couple of years of Edgehill were tremendous. It was a tremendous learning curve. So, we did some, business. We did some we did some deals in the business that, and in the industry that like we would never do again. But that's part of what, not because of bad people associated with anything, more so just the deals themselves. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have good counsel around us. We didn't have good advisors around us. We just didn't have a good sense at all in terms of what it was all about. And it's a really interesting, it's a really, really interesting industry. It's one in which, and we have been involved with, either actively involved with or have looked at so many different types of industries. And this one to me is right up there as being one of the most complex industries and businesses that is out there.
And you're working with a lot of creatives that like don't necessarily have the people protecting them either. So like you came in with a full business, like this is how you work. So you would get started and immediately there's contracts and lawyers, and that's how your thought process is. And I think it's so important because in the music industry, when you're working with a lot of these artists and writers, they're young, they don't have that, they don't have the money, they don't look for the attorneys to help them and stuff like that. So I think that when we were coming on, we knew business, but we didn't necessarily know the music business. So like it took a lot of learning on our part. Like what we understood was supposed to be a certain way in business wasn't necessarily the way it would be in the music business.
Yeah.
So we had to like learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
But because you did come with such a big background and knowledge of like business itself, it's very applicable to any industry. So you have to just kind of figure out how to make it work for what we're doing in the music industry. And on top of it, we also didn't know that there's like backing artists and backing writers. Like we did not know the difference and how that all worked. So what we learned is we're just not the people that want to sit and help back the artists. We're the people that want to help back the writers behind those artists. So it looks very different.
Or you can be an artist and a writer at the same time, and so you're hoping
100%.
So you're backing
exactly.
the artist indirectly
In a different way.
Through their writing.
Yes.
But you're backing the artist.
Yes.
So which we still do today.
Yes.
On our roster. So on our publishing roster. But yeah, it was it started out really, really clunky. But I think I'm very hopeful, and I think we're in a really cool, unique position today. We were able to bring aboard a woman a little over 3 years ago, which is also wild that Julie has been with us that long now at this point. So
the biggest little blessing ever.
So she is absolutely phenomenal. She's like family. We love her dearly, and she was brought in to basically when you and I looked at each other and we said, hey, listen, we can either cut bait right now because we made a bunch of mistakes and it's a really expensive venture to get into.
It's very expensive.
It's a very expensive venture to get into. And we're an independent publisher, so we don't have any outside, funding or financing partners. It's our family who is behind Edgehill. And so that's different than, dealing with like a major publishing company such as a Warner Chappell or a Universal or a Sony. Those are the big majors that are out there. And then you have like a lot of mid majors as well. And then you have some independents. You have a bunch of independents also, but most independents, I would argue, even have some sort of financing partner behind them, and they're not really self-financed and self-funded. I would argue that we're probably one of the very, very few fully like self-funded independent publishing companies. And so that cuts both ways. It does. And in some ways, I love it that way because it gives us the flexibility to, not have any outside voices, pressures or anything like that. We have some joint ventures with Warner Chappell. We have like 2 or 3 joint ventures, which have proven to be great. They're a wonderful, wonderful partner of ours. We're kind of on our own, and so it's a really cool, unique business. And I think it's, coming
it's an incredible blessing, but it is hard because we are the only two that finance, out of our pocket. So like you said, there isn't a backer of any sort. It's us. It gives us carte blanche to be as creative as we want. There are still standards that you follow, that you do as part of a publishing company, but it gives us a little more flexibility, but it also becomes a lot more intense when you know that you're financing it all yourself and you're trying to back people. Like, that's your investment. So you guys understand, you are actually investing in the people themselves and their catalogs and how good their writing skills are. And if any of those rights are going to be cut by, you know, artists, if they're going to be played on a radio, if they're going to be streamed. And so it's a different kind of an investment, but you really are investing a lot in that person.
No, you are, yeah, you're 100% investing in that person. You know, you're investing in that person, you're investing in their work ethic, their character, obviously their talent, you know, their history, or if they don't have a history necessarily in the business per se, that like where they haven't really hit it yet, but you know, some sort of trajectory that, you know, you can see some sort of pathway to, you know, making it work. And I think that when you and I decided to go forward and keep Edgehill going, and we decided to commit to building out, you know, studios. We have beautiful studios that we built out in Nashville, in our offices, that are state-of-the-art studios. And when we decided to make that investment, and then we were able to bring Julia aboard, we made a commitment to kind of stay with it. Not kind of, to stay with it. And you know, we're now in a position where we have a greatly curated roster of songwriters, producers, artists, continuing to grow. I'd say probably for me the most challenging is that almost everybody in the music business who are like that we've come across, if you sit down and you get to meet them and you hear them, you can fall in love with them in like 30 seconds, because more often than not, they're really, really nice. They have a really great story behind them. They have a passion for something really cool and unique, which is, you know, in the arts and in music. So one of the hardest things early on to learn, or midway through kind of where we've been, is to learn to like strip away falling in love with every single person and their story, because you can fall in love with every single person and their story, generally
That was
speaking.
our downfall, is like we had, everybody was tugging at our heartstrings, and so we like needed to look at a bigger picture, but we didn't know what that bigger picture was, because I felt like every day it's like you're on The Voice, right? And like every day somebody's telling something to you.
Yeah, they are. They're telling you stories, you know, and not in a bad way. They're telling you their stories and their history and their passion and their vision. But at the same time, I think we also came to learn a whole bunch about work ethic and the difference between someone like you referenced, you know, who is really pushing to be an artist. You know, they're also maybe a songwriter, but they're really more driven towards being an artist versus a songwriter. And in some cases that works really well. In other cases, it doesn't work great, you know, from a publisher standpoint, from, you know, not against anyone individually, but as a publisher. So it's been a really unique ride. I think the songwriting community is like super cool to see in Nashville. It's really, really neat. Being around producers is really, really neat. You know, understanding like just what goes into this thing. And I think also the way that Julia and we have curated this roster to date, where there's very little overlap, there's very little competition amongst the roster itself, but there's more collaboration, more ability for Julia and our team to create, you know, some sort of collaboration amongst the team, if you will, in the roster, where they can work together versus working against each other.
Correct.
Has been like super, super smart on Julia's part and on our collective part, you know, and that vision has been really, I think, brought to the forefront. And we're starting to see today.
This was one of our best, like,
well,
I think Q4 was like our best, right?
Yeah, Q4 of last year was by far and away our best to date in terms of you know, royalties and seeing, you know, some return on, you know, what has been invested into the business and invested into our roster. And it's also, well, it's 100% a business, so you know, you're in it to make money, but at the same time, it's really, really cool and really awesome to see like some of the folks on our roster who've been with us, and you're rooting for them because they're just great people. They're great humans.
100%.
And I think that we've also done collectively a great job of starting to work over the last few years in particular with folks that are just such good human beings, so driven, and just work their butts off. And they root for each other as well. You know, there's a camaraderie approach to it. Which is great. So to see some of these wins starting to happen is awesome. It's great for us, but it's like, it's so cool to see the wins starting to happen for the folks on our roster. And then I would say, and now I'm going to stop talking and you jump in, but I think one of the hardest things to do, being in the publisher's chair, when a contract is coming up, and you're sitting around the table and you're trying to make the decision as to whether or not you might pick up an option in a contract, or if their options have run out, do you want to have a discussion with that writer, producer, artist, about a possible new deal and what that looks like, and or you don't, you already know going into it at the end of a term that we've made a decision, just for the betterment, for whatever our perspective is, for the betterment of Edgehill, we're just not going to move forward. And having a conversation with someone, it's always very difficult in those cases, no matter what business it is. Making those decisions and discussions, and and then having those conversations, that's really hard, but they're also necessary. I would say that that's probably, I think that's like, because emotionally you get attached to these people, and Edgehill is like a family, very much so, and that's been the culture. But at the end of the day, it still is a business, and it's an expensive business to run, and as a business owner, you have to make money. So while you have the personal and emotional piece of it, you also have that business piece of it. Whereas in traditional business, yes, you can absolutely have a personal and emotional attachment to folks that work with and for you, but it's different. It's not, in my opinion, it's different.
In the creative space, though, when they've been with part of your like family per se, and because we are so small, we are that boutique hands-on. I mean, we're not like that big conglomerate that like doesn't know anyone that's on our roster legitimately. Like, they're in and out of our office, they're hanging with us, we're spending time together. So what's happened in the time frame that they've been on our roster, we've also watched them and cheered them on. And our team is so cool, because even like at Big Plan Holdings, there's like a crossover. They come and show up for the Edgehill like writers, and people are cheering each other on. And so there's such a cool crossover that like at the end, when you're at the end of their time, you're like, God, you've seen them grow. And it's not like people don't have talent. That's the other thing. Like, they're so talented. So you're kind of like, oh my God, like this is a really talented person, but it may not just be the time for us anymore. Like, maybe it's time that you have to move on.
Right.
And so that's a hard thing. You're not just like, you're not saying to yourself, I'm letting them go because they're not talented or anything. That's actually not the case. You've watched them develop and grow and see changes in them. And and a lot of the times we've even seen more talent come out of them by the time we're done, because of the support that we've given them and the support that they have. Because a lot of artists just want those cheerleaders. They want people to know that they support behind the scenes. So it is a hard mix of like, trying to know that we are a business still, but also trying to keep it so we like being able to separate ourselves for the times when you have a contract coming to an end. So like, just so people know, like, how do you work on like signing somebody for a year or 2 years plus with like, explain to people like kind of what I know it's in. Please understand when we're explaining this, we are creating something that like we kind of create this and curate this based on who those different writers are. But there's options that we have that we can kind of create. So give an idea of like what an option looks like for when we go to
what a deal looks like. More often than not, you'll sign a writer or a producer to a 1 year deal, 1 year, maybe a 2 year committed deal, where we advance money, which is basically it's a draw against future earnings, which are called royalties. So it's usually either a 1 or 2 year upfront commitment from us as the publishing company to the individual, and then you typically will build in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 1 year options, which are more often than not unilaterally up to the publisher to pick up those options. And so you work out, just like in any business deal, you work out the financial arrangement of what you're going to pay as the publisher to the writer, producer, or artist, on an annual basis, which gets in Nashville. The publishing deals are different than they are in Los Angeles, generally speaking. So Nashville deals are typically much lower dollar amounts versus LA oriented deals, which are typically speaking much higher, paid up front more often than not in LA. Nashville are lower deals, which are paid over monthly installments.
Or quarterly.
Or quarterly, depending on what you do, right? We have not heard very often that in Nashville, like somebody gets a big check up front. You know, I mean, unless you're maybe some crazy big ass writer or something like that. But a typical deal is like 1 or 2 years, and then with 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 year options at the publisher's discretion to pick up. The writer will have a minimum song requirement on an annual basis, which they are required to deliver, X amount of wholly written songs, if you will. So not to get too much in the weeds, but if you have 3 people in a writing session, that song that gets completed in that session or coming out of that session and ultimately becomes a song, a recorded song, that writer gets, each of those people in the room gets 33%. So if a writer has a minimum song requirement on an annual basis of 10 wholly owned and written songs, you would need to do, and you had a third of all 10 as an example, you would have to have 30 songs basically on an annual basis to be submitted to your publisher to meet your requirement. And so LA's different, or not, LA deals and pop deals and R&B deals we've learned are very different, because you can have anywhere from 5 to 20 people sometimes on a song and some of those, but those also could get, those could be big smashes pretty quickly. So there's
pop
so much
easier.
Pop is,
because you could get a pop, you really could.
You can, so there's a whole bunch of different genres of music, obviously, and there's different things, but that go into it. But yeah, typically that's how it works. And then you might have a 4-way, right, where every writer in that room, every person in that room owns 25% of a song. Yep. You might have a 2-way where it's 50%. Very infrequent. You have just a solo writer. But I think most of what we have seen to date have typically been either 3 or 4 writers in a room. So for a song, I should say. So that's usually how it works. And so a writer has an annual minimum requirement to provide to their publisher, and then there's a whole bunch of other complexities to it. But
that carries over. So like, let's say your deal is over, like you still legally have to turn in those songs. So you're still tied to that publisher until all your songs are actually turned in.
Right.
And some people have it like they'll just not turn them in during that time, and all of a sudden they turn in all 30 of them at the very end, which may or may not be great songs. Like they might just be like, I just turned them in because I owe them to you. And then other people turn them in throughout the whole year. Like it just kind of depends on how it's done. But technically you are tethered to that to that publisher until all your songs are legally turned in for the amount of money that you were paid for during that time based on your contract.
So yeah, but we're running out of time, but we can, talk about publishing another time as well. But it's a really cool, unique, nuanced business. There's a lot that goes into it. It's songs that you hear on the radio. It's songs you hear on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, all that kind of stuff. But
what's your favorite part of the business?
My favorite part of it, I would say, I don't think I've seen my favorite part yet.
Okay.
I think my favorite part is going to come in 2 things. I think it's going to be just the business side of me is going to be like when we actually make some money.
Yeah.
But just like right next to that, honestly, it's like some of the folks that, are on our roster and have been with us now for, years. I can't wait for them to like just get some smashes, and they can celebrate, successes. I don't want to throw out like names, per se, but there are several people that are on our roster, actually all of them, quite frankly, that like they're surrounded by so many people that, not everyone that they're surrounded by, but like so many other people that have already had multiple number ones or a number one, or like are bubbling to like, have had like already a taste of like real deal success. And I think our roster is finally at the point where it's like bubbling to the point where
that one song away.
We're just like, we're going to see it happen for multiple people that have been working with us, and they work so hard. So I'm really excited to see that. So I would say my 2 favorite things haven't happened yet.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree with you on that. I get so excited when I get to hear like the music being produced from like when we're in the front of the office and I'm hearing like they're wordsmiths, right? Like writers are just, they can sit down and like there's a napkin and all of a sudden they're creating a song over a napkin. And it is so mind boggling to me to hear that. But you hear them in the front of the office, because the back is where our production studios are, and they're going over the same words over and over and over again, and they're mixing the music just a little bit more, and I'm like hearing the whole journey of that song, and it's just so cool to me to see that process. And when you walk past and they're all like giggling about something, a liner that they came up with or whatever, and that culmination is part of like what I like truly love to see, because I love a whole journey of an artist. I love seeing how they come up with a concept and like the steps that you take to make that come into fruition. I want them to be successful and stuff, but I love when these different musicians are coming in and out, and these artists are coming in and out of our building, and it's so full of life, and they're coming in with this idea and this concept, and they're all getting together because it's part of the hang. And then you're hearing these things come alive. It's so cool to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I think also another thing that I love seeing is, or two things. I love learning the business side of it because it's a really complex business, and I think that looking at where we're at today versus where we were at even a year ago or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we've become like way smarter about decisions to make, how to make them, those types of things. So I like that piece of it a lot. And I also really, really, really love to see Julia be able to be a young woman who is going to absolutely, I mean, she was a badass when she started working with us, but like who's just absolutely phenomenal. So to see her like in how her mind has continue to evolve and develop, and like her perspective of how to build out a roster and not have that competitive nature, like overlapping competition, but curating I love seeing her career as well, like progress to where it is today. And I can just like, honestly, I can just imagine, like, I sound like her dad or something, but hey Kevin. So, but
and I feel right. Hey Kevin.
Hey Kevin.
I also feel that way about Spencer, to see how he's developed. Like Spencer created this business with us, when he came in, I mean, he was just so green, right? Like it just and he came in thinking he was like a know-it-all, and he got put in his place multiple times in that city.
Oh, there's one woman who put him in his place good.
Totally, and still will to this day. But like, he has such an ear, and he's so freaking talented, and watching how he's developed, he's just on that cusp, because he's going to be like that next producer that everyone's going to freaking want.
Well, Spencer, we better hope so, because you're heavily non-recouped. You're heavily unrecouped at this point. So as we are about to sign you to an extension, you have a lot of pressure on your shoulders. Just so
Josh is signing him for 2 decades. 2 decades.
There's a 20-year deal.
20-year deal.
Yeah, our lawyer's going to absolutely destroy your lawyer, by the way, Spence, just so you know. But yeah, I would say that, those two in particular, but it's the entire roster, which
of course it is.
Is great. And so that's it. But yeah, much more to talk about, because it's a really cool, unique industry. We didn't even touch upon like sync placements and streaming and the different types of complexities between genres and what works, what doesn't, what works in country doesn't work in pop music, what works internationally doesn't necessarily work domestically, so there's all sorts of just crazy stuff. But thank you very much.
Thank you guys for joining us. And I know this was good, because I think it's important. Like, people don't know all the different things that we're working on, and people don't understand different industries, and that's what we're here to share. So thank you guys.
Thank you,
Hello, easy, how you do? Yeah, I've been holding